Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this one-day UVA virtual talk series. My name is Susan Lynch. I am the Associate Director of Lifetime Learning at the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement. I'm so pleased to be hosting this event this afternoon that will provide some history of Hanukkah and highlight the vibrant Jewish community here at the University of Virginia. Before starting the program, I want to provide some quick housekeeping items. To engage with the audience, our speakers will answer questions submitted before and during the program as time allows. You may enter a question in the webinar Q&A. Please add your name and UVA affiliation. You'll find resources in the webinar chat. Please also note this program is being recorded and will soon be posted in Lifetime Learning's podcast library. I will introduce the moderator and then he will introduce the rest of the panelists. James Loeffler is the J. Berkovitz Professor of Jewish History and the Ida and Nathan Kolodiz Director of Jewish Studies at the University of Virginia. Between 2013 and 2015, he was a Mellon Foundation New Directions Fellow in the International Law and Dean's Visiting Scholar at the Georgetown University Law Center. At UVA, he teaches courses in Jewish and European history, Russian and Eastern European history, international legal history, and the history of human rights. He's a co-convener of the UVA Human Rights Research Network, a faculty partner in the UVA Religion, Race, and Democracy Lab, and co-editor of the Association for Jewish Studies Review. In 2020, he was elected a fellow of the American Academy for Jewish Research. So thank you again for joining us for this Lifetime Learning program. Now I'm going to turn the program over to our moderator. Professor Loeffler, please take it away.
Thank you very much. Hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you, Susan Lynch, and the whole team at Lifetime Learning, which is part of the Office of Engagement of the University of Virginia. We are really excited to be here today to talk about Hanukkah and the Jewish experience at UVA, to answer some questions and share some reflections as well. And when I say we, I mean both myself in my capacity, as you heard, as director of the Jewish Studies program and a history professor, and two wonderful other members of the university community who work do the work of teaching students and empowering them to explore the Jewish experience. So you will see up here Professor and Rabbi Vanessa Ochs. And Vanessa is somebody who has been at the heart of the Jewish Studies program, as well as Jewish life at the university for a long time now. She teaches in the Department of Religious Studies, and her arrival really marked the beginnings of a new phase of formal development of Jewish studies at the university. She's made her mark since that time through a variety of very important teaching in areas that range from Jewish feminism to the ethnographic study of religion, that is anthropology of religion, spiritual writing, as well as roles involving leading the Jewish Studies program, chairing the professional consulting committee, and her involvement with the UVA health system. Equally importantly, she's also the author of numerous acclaimed works, including Inventing Jewish Ritual, a prize-winning study of the rituals of Jewish modern experience and religious life. And most recently, the Passover Haggadah, a biography from Princeton University Press, which is a really remarkable book that's a biography of a book at the center of Jewish religion and Jewish life in all of its complexity and diversity. Professor Ochs and myself are joined by Rabbi Jake Rubin. And he is, of course, the executive director of the Brody Jewish Center, where he has served in that role since 2009. And he's been a pioneering educator and religious leader and mentor to, now we can say, almost generations of Jewish students, as well as a really important member of the larger UVA community. He served as president of United Ministries at UVA, and take an important role in developing Jewish life and addressing the variety of ways in which Jewish religious and cultural life impacts the university, and the university impacts it as well. Most important to say about Rabbi Jake Rubin is, of course, that he is not only a Virginia native from Richmond, but he is a graduate and holds a BA in Religious Studies from UVA, and is someone who has grown out of the institution and returned to it to really shape it and grow its next iteration and into the future. So what we're going to do today in our conversation is talk about a number of themes that are of interest to many people in the public today and in the UVA community, as stakeholders want to know, I think, a lot about what is going on, what's it like for Jewish students, faculty and staff at UVA, What's it like in this moment in which an historic trial has just concluded involving the 2017 Unite the Right march on the university and in Charlottesville? And what's it like, of course, with all the other complicated issues that a university of this standing confronts with thinking about how to service the needs of Jewish members of the student body, how to think about public-facing scholarship that can engage with controversial and important questions about American society, about religious pluralism, about anti-Semitism, and then also, where do Jews sort of fit into the fabric of life today? So we're going to start with one of the most basic features of Jewish life, which is our liturgical calendar. And we're tying this into the fact that, of course, that tonight marks the third night of the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. And we wanted to share a little bit about that holiday too, for those of you curious about it, and use it also as a kind of jumping off point into our conversation. So for that, I'm going to turn it over to Professor and Rabbi Ochs to ask her to share some reflections about the holiday's significance and get us going in our conversation today. I'll say one more thing. As you've heard, Q&A is open. We already have some wonderful questions, and we'll be taking more, and we will be threading some of them into our conversation throughout the hour, as well as turning to those at the end that to kind of clean up with other themes that maybe still deserve to be addressed and haven't been covered yet. So now, Professor Ochs, if you will.
Thank you so much, Professor Loeffler, whom I also call Jim, and I call Rabbi Rubin Jake. I especially call Rabbi Rubin Jake because he was my student long ago, and it's such a wonderful thing to be together with him working at UVA. Both, and thank you so much for having us today. And I especially want to greet my former students and their families and new friends. Now, when I speak about Hanukkah, I should tell you that I will speak at much greater length in the fall when I'm teaching Intro to Judaism. So you'll just have to come back to campus, come back to grounds, and join me then. My colleague, Jenna Joslet, once described Hanukkah as once a backwater of a holiday, which was greeted with a modicum of fanfare. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and Hanukkah was about to drip off the map. There was a little coloring book that you could pick out little pieces and lick it. I think this was before stick-ons, and you could lick it and stick it on, and that was quite exciting. And there was chocolate gelt. My mother, if I needed socks, she got me socks and said, "That's your Hanukkah present." And if we remembered, we lit the menorah, especially if we were with my Orthodox grandparents. And I'm not describing anything that's particularly unusual. The fact that Hanukkah is now a super extravaganza in America, and quite the extravaganza in Israel right now. Israeli children, much to the dismay of their parents who are still at work, are off during most of Hanukkah. This year, at least, there are things they can do. There's this Hanukkah festival called Festigal, which last year was online. It got saved. But I want to take you back in history a little bit. When we speak about the historical roots of Hanukkah, they are fairly contested. We have in Jewish memory some inklings of a long, long ago holiday, which involved bringing light into darkness. Surprise, surprise, just about every religion has some sort of a festival in the dark times about bringing in light and conquering darkness with acts of light. We have in the books of the Maccabees, which are not canonized in Jewish scripture. I think that's important to state. We have these stories of victories of a small group of Jewish zealots over occupying Syrian Greek rulers who had taken control over the temple, as the story goes, defiled it. And these Jewish zealots called the Maccabees, they would not have liked us we who are around today. They would not have liked us at all, especially those of us who work at UVA, work and teach at UVA, and work out at our gyms, because they were very much against any Jews who were Hellenized. That is, in particular, those who engaged in going to the gymnasiums, in caring about physical health and knowledge of the broader world. Come the generation of the rabbis of the Talmud, the rabbis are not at all fond of this Maccabee story. So much so that in the text, one of the texts in the Talmud concerning Hanukkah, the rabbis ask, "My Hanukkah, like, what's Hanukkah?" You're like, holy mackerel, you would think that a bunch of Jewish sages would have some idea about what Hanukkah was. And they're talking, do we light, do we start with a lot of lights and go to a few lights? Do we start with a few lights and go to a lot of lights? Of course, Hillel, who wants to add lights, we go with Hillel and not Shammai, which is a good thing. And they promote a story of a miracle. They want to spiritualize the story, and they promote a story about the desecration of the temple. The Maccabees come in, they find that there's only enough oil for 1 day. Miracle of miracles, there's enough oil for 8 days until new oil can be made. My feeling has always been, if God can work miracles, God can do more than oil. But that's a personal story. It seems like a very, very small miracle. In the United States, as I mentioned, Hanukkah was really losing ground, falling into desuetude is the fancy word that people such as Mordechai Kaplan, father of Reconstructionist Judaism, coined. And it begins to grow. Thank you, Christians, thank you, Christmas. Hanukkah begins to grow in America when Jews observe the joy of Christmas, the warm family gatherings of Christmas, the decorations, the presents, gifts, that is to say. And I'm not going to say that this is a bad thing, that this is assimilation. Jews have always learned from our neighboring friends, our neighboring cultures, different ways of giving our celebrations meaning. And I will just end by telling you a little bit, like, what kinds of meanings are Jews in Charlottesville giving to Hanukkah? Fortunately, Rabbi Jake shared with me a list of what's going on at UVA Hillel for 8 days. Now you tell me if this is connected to the Maccabee victory, or if this is connected to the spiritualized miracle. On one of the 8 nights, there is cookie making. That doesn't seem military, that doesn't seem terribly spiritualized, but it does seem like a lot of fun. On another night, this is a final pre-basketball Shabbat dinner with some kind of a tournament, dreidel madness. Again, the dreidel seems familiar, but what's this? There's a Hanukkah sweatshirt pick up. There is, and now here's when the Maccabees would not have liked, a Jewish student athlete club Hanukkah brunch. I mean, talk about major transgression. I would want to say, and this is not in such jocular mode, I want to say that all of these activities, which are being sponsored by UVA Hillel, that these to me speak to self-care, speak to comfort, speak to coziness, speak to warmth, speak to community. And since I've noticed lately, and Rabbi Jake has noticed this as well, many Hillels across the country are now hiring full-time Jewish mental health professionals. Our students, the Jewish students at UVA and all of our students have really struggled these last 2 years with COVID. And it surprises me not at all that so many of the UVA Hanukkah celebrations are about finally coming together, doing warm things, doing cozy things, evincing a kind of normal happiness, which we feel we finally can have and deserve. And so when people in the street who notice I'm Jewish or who know me say to me, "Happy Hanukkah," meaning that this must be the biggest event of your Jewish life. And I mean, I'm prone to say, well, no, it's no big deal, actually. But I silence myself because I feel very happy that when Jewishness is noticed in America, if Jewishness is noticed at the University of Virginia, and more so, if I can feel safe as a Jew celebrating my holiday in a public way, which I know I can in Charlottesville now, or I generally feel that it's safe to be a Jew in Charlottesville. And of course, we'll be speaking more about that. So thanks for this opportunity.
You. So you've given us such a precise but also rich set of images about where the holiday comes from and its meanings, the meanings it's accrued and how people have shaped it, right, down to the present. I want to remind people that if there are things we're not mentioning and you're curious about, go ahead and put in a question. Because as Professor Ochs said, we certainly going to our cycle through a couple different topics. But with this, I want to pivot over to Rabbi Rubin and ask him his take on how the holiday is resonating and how he sees Jewish student community and student life these days. It's always the case that many students come into the university and want to bring with them the traditions from home, but others want to grow in new ways and meet people who are different than themselves, and also create, right? That's what's so unique, I think, about UVA students is that they want to lead, they want to build themselves. So tell us a little bit what's going on at the Brody Center these days in terms of that, Jake.
Sure, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here and excited to share a little bit about what's going on. So I think one of the things to pick up on that I think Vanessa pulled out very clearly was one of our main values, one of our main strategies in helping students get connected is really helping them understand what it means to belong to a Jewish community and creating a sense of belonging. Because for us, a lot of our students come to us with some level of Jewish engagement and some level of Jewish background, but our students are really smart students, right? University is a highly academic place, and a lot of our students are coming with a Jewish education and identity that is not up to the same level as their academic level. And so a lot of what we need to do is help create a community where they feel comfortable and they can be their authentic selves, and then they can begin to push and learn and admit that they don't know things. Like that is one of the biggest fears of our students is looking dumb, right? And they avoid places like that. So a huge piece of what we do is trying to create relationships with students so that they have personal connections and building community. Because once we've done that, then they have friends who can invite them in to particular programs. So, right, our main methodology is called the engagement methodology, and it is really about staff and student leaders and interns meeting with students one-on-one, getting to know them and who they are, building relationships with them, understanding what they care about and what they're passionate about, and then designing programs around those things, or inviting them in, as Jim was saying, and empowering them to help create those different experiences for themselves and for their peers. Without that piece, we see far fewer students. And so all of the different things that Vanessa was talking about are pretty low barrier events that get people in the door so that they can build relationships and begin to understand. But while they're there, they're going to light the menorah. They're going to learn, they're going to learn a little bit about Hanukkah. There are Hanukkah around ground celebrations that each individual student is going to be able to host their own type of event and bring their own traditions and bring people together. There's a large community-wide one that will happen on Monday. There's a tradition here called Lighting of the Lawn where there are a cappella groups and the lawn gets lit up. It's beautiful, but it is very much, for our students, feels as if it is a Christmas event. And so while our students love it and love to be a part of it, they also do feel like that is not exactly their place. And so one of the things we've done in recent years is create an event that happens either concurrently in one of the gardens or right before in one of the gardens, where Jewish students are able to come, they're able to bring their friends. And it's about Hanukkah, right? It's eating latkes, it's sufganiyot, it's lighting the menorah. We've had a Jewish a cappella group come and sing. There's lots of different things that happen, but it created a space for them to feel like they were connected and belong, and had that safe space within the larger community. So the belonging piece is a really big piece of what we do. And we've moved our leadership structure to essentially is entirely made up of different interns who engage students. So there are about 40 different interns that work for Hillel that are out there meeting with students and creating different programming. And the goal is really to figure out, overall, what we're trying to do is empower students to take ownership of their Jewish identity. We want them to, when they leave here, feel that they're equipped, they have the desire, they know how to do it, and they have the love of Judaism that they want to continue to learn, that they continue to be curious, that they continue to engage with Jewish communities outside of this. And so that looks different for every student. And so there's a massive spectrum of things that we do, from bagels on the lawn, which happens on Wednesdays, which is what it sounds like, right? People come and eat Bodo's bagels and hang out and meet people, but it's an opportunity for our interns to meet people and our staff to meet people. And then our folks follow up with those and say, can we grab coffee? Can we get to know you a little bit more? Can we understand what you care about, what you'd like to see us do? All the way to all kinds of learning fellowships that we do. There's a Jewish learning fellowship that's 10 weeks, which is looking at Jewish texts and having meals and really talking about significant issues that exist in the world and connecting them to Jewish ideas. There's one about leadership development. There's one about Israel. And there's lots of different ways that we do that. And then we have smaller ones called Hoogs, which are a little bit more fun. Like I just did one called God on the Radio, which was a 4-week session. And it was looking at popular songs and using them as jumping off points to talk about theology and to talk about different conceptions of God and ways to understand God and help them explore their own particular beliefs. So there's one which watches The Bachelor, but then The Bachelorette, but then also is talking about Jewish ideas of relationship and intimacy and what that looks like. And so there are lots of different ways that we do this, but the goal is ultimately that students find their place within the Jewish people and find something that grabs them and that continues to grow with them. So that's a little bit of a taste, just for just sheer numbers sake, because I think this always shocks people, especially who haven't been here recently. We think there are about 1,000 undergraduate Jewish students that are at the university. And over the course of the year, we see about 725 of those students. It's a highly affiliated community. And about half of those are doing things many times, right? Who are engaged in lots of different ways, whether that's doing one of these learning fellowships or going on an alternative break trip or a trip to Israel or any of these different pieces. So there are lots of different ways that people engage, but and our goal always is to get them to take ownership, to then have them begin to build those opportunities for themselves and for others. So I'll stop there and
yeah, thank you, Jake.
Yeah.
I think you so nicely describe the richness, but also the variety, right, of Jewish student experience. And all the things you've just mentioned are clearly indicate that this is a community which is not only about simply religious observance, right? There are many students who, for them, the Jewish Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath is a key stop on their week, right? Checking in, getting together with friends. Prayer, worship is important. For others, it's about cultural activities and wanting to do, or social action, right? Wanting to do tzedakah, wanting to do the work of Jewish moral action, sometimes called charity. And for others, it's about Israel and engaging with Jewish life there, representing it, studying it, arguing about it, right? That's all there. Different ways of identifying. And I would say, especially to make it clear for folks who've joined us for this conversation, what Vanessa and I do over in the Jewish Studies program is different. It's complementary. It's more a community of inquiry, right? So we get many of those same Jewish students and many non-Jewish students who come in with some of the questions that I see are filtering in now, which is, where is the borderline between religion and ethnic identity when it comes to Jews? Judaism and Christianity, how are they related, right? So we as a program live in the college, and our goal is basically to train people to explore those questions in Jewish history, Jewish thought, Jewish experience, Jewish languages, teaching Hebrew. In recent years, we've also taught Yiddish and Ladino, the Sephardic Jewish language, and to let people inquire. Sometimes, I think it's fair to say, a lot of students come in who are not ready to go to Hillel, or they may not be Jewish, but they may have some Jewish family members and they want to engage it, or they've come out of a Catholic school and they want to learn more about their own religious tradition in relationship to Judaism. So a lot of what we do is also engaging those students and giving them a chance to think through that, as well as many other contemporary issues such as anti-Semitism. But before we turn to that, I want to turn back to Professor Ochs and ask her a little bit about what it's like to explore Jewish life and Jewish identity in the classroom. You've done so much to show kind of the landscape of UVA, what it is, through the teaching you've done, and to encourage students also to think about writing as a way of inquiring as well as figuring out one's identity. How would you say the experience is for teaching Jewish studies at UVA?
I think it's absolutely thrilling. I have the best job. I think it's thrilling because when many of our Jewish students have had really negative experiences in Hebrew school, and finally they're having an experience where Judaism is being taught as a serious matter, and their classmates who are not Jewish are also taking it really seriously. You can't be a cut up in the class, and their classmates are highly respectful of their Jewish tradition, which they sort of possess, but they might not know very much about. And the way I try to address Judaism and Jewish experience in the classroom is through an experiential mode. That is, instead of turning Judaism into ideas, theologies, and texts, I present Judaism as what Jewish people have done and are doing now, and how Jews have always been inventing modes of Jewish expression, which means that my students can look around them. They can look at TV, they can look at what's going on downtown, they can look at shops, they can look at what's on sale at Wegmans in the kosher department. They can see Judaism happening. And it's not something that only happens in Israel, something that only happens in Brooklyn. It's here around them. One of my favorite assignments is at the beginning of my Jewish weddings class, which I'm teaching right now. And the assignment is, tell me about your Jewish wedding. And they have to find a Jewish person who had a Jewish wedding, and they just ask about it. And they're supposed to say, don't teach me about what it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to mean. Just tell me what happened to you. And this models for my students the possibility of acquiring knowledge in a very natural kind of way. And when the knowledge becomes natural and secondhand, then they feel more safe going into texts and histories and reading the scholarship of experts. I just have to tell you, everybody, that yesterday was our first Jewish wedding of the season on the lawn, and a group of Jewish and not Jewish and students of all orientations created this fabulous wedding with a what do you call that tubing, that plastic tubing? Poly something.
PVC tube.
PVC, a chuppah made out of PVC tubes right in front of the steps of the rotunda. And visitors are walking by and they're just going, okay, so it's a Jewish wedding. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. It's a Jewish wedding.
Yeah.
A Jewish wedding.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that highlights the theme you mentioned earlier in your remarks, Vanessa, about visibility, right? And I think that it's one of the things that's striking if you compare experience today to decades past. And I know there are alumni from different moments in time joining us for this conversation, is how much more visible I think Jewish presence is. And that is reflected both in the events that take place on the lawn or elsewhere, which are very open events and attract a lot of interest from different parts of the student body. And then the events we do, as a program where we are in dialogue with a lot of the core initiatives of the university about democracy. And we do events that basically now connect over to the law school, to the health and medical system, to the more recent addition to the University of the Baton School leadership. And so there's a lot of ways in which our students, as well as the work we're doing, is kind of more visible and therefore invites more questions, invites more interest from the university. So with that, let me turn now to a theme that I think many people have asked us about in different ways, which is really one word, anti-Semitism, right? And what's the climate like, right? Of course, we are 4 years after the alt-right march on Charlottesville, right? And that was a really difficult, traumatic event for everyone in Charlottesville, and in particular for the Jewish community, which was right next to some of the key events for Jewish students, some of whom were right in the line of that thrust and attack. And of course, it raised hard questions about what we should do in response. At the same time, many people are aware from the media, and many parents are curious and concerned about the climate on campus and whether the Middle East conflict spills over right into the daily lives, let alone the classrooms of students. So we are 3 people here, and the old joke is 2 Jews, 3 opinions. We're 3 Jews, you might get 4 opinions. But I'd like to start by asking Rabbi Rubin, Jake, to say a little bit about how he sees that and how he sees students engaging with those things, and how what are the ways in which that impacts their experience?
Sure. Yeah. So we get this question a lot, especially when it's prospective parents and student season. And what I generally say is that we've been incredibly fortunate. There is no question that it exists, right? And what I've August 11th and 12th aside, which is something I think very different, qualitatively different than students' normal lives here. We're very fortunate. Every once in a while, there will be some sort of event that happens, whether that was, somebody wrote something on a whiteboard, or somebody tagged an apartment building where a lot of Jewish students lived. There are things that happen every few years. And always what I'm looking to see is what's the response of the university community and what's the response of the university. And in every case, they have been exactly what you would hope and ask for, right? Complete support, asking what they can do for us, what we need, being very clear that it is not it's not acceptable. It's not part of the university community. And we have always felt incredibly supported around that. I will say, as I'm sure many of you have read, understand here, like there is an uptick that is happening, and we have heard more this year, in the last couple of years, of different things happening. One of the challenges is that a lot of times we hear those things through anonymous sources. Like there are some particular sites that collect these things, and people can submit things without having any kind of name or anything like that. So it makes it incredibly difficult for us to be able to then follow up. There are ways in which we do, and we try, and all of those things. And yet, without having the person to talk to and having specifics about which class or where it happened, or right, that makes it very difficult. So there's a question, frankly, about whether or not that's always been there, and we're just now seeing it because there are these different mediums through which people can put things in anonymously, or there is really an uptick. But what I would say in general is that we've been incredibly fortunate. Our students feel very comfortable being Jewish here, feel are outwardly will wear Jewish symbols. The sweatshirt that Vanessa was talking about is a sweatshirt that says Happy Hanukkah on it. And it is part of actually a Jewish Federation system about visibility and about Jews being visible in displaying publicly, their faith and their identity. And so, and we've got lots of students who want them and will wear them and have, stickers on their laptops that say, actually there's one here, Huish and Jewish, or Wajua, or, there are lots of different ways that they do it, but they're not afraid to do that. And so I think that's good. Look, the anti-Israel piece of it also, I think, has shifted in the last couple of years. We are definitely seeing some more of that. Again, we are incredibly lucky. It is not something that we deal with like a lot of my colleagues do around the country constantly. This is the first year there was a BDS petition that is being circulated, but it has gotten very, very little traction. And look, it's a university. There are lots of ideas that are expressed, and people bring in speakers and have conversations. And frankly, that's what they should be doing, right? They should debate these things and have these conversations. And at least at this point, those conversations have been respectful. And while lots of different sides will disagree on the message or the conclusions drawn, generally they are able to have conversations with them about them respectfully and move on. That's not the case in a lot of campuses, and so it doesn't mean that it couldn't change tomorrow, but at least to this point, we're very fortunate. And what that allows us to do is host all kinds of different events that are, whether it's an Israel Education Fellowship or cultural events or about the diversity in Israel, and partnering. We've done programs where we partnered with the Baha'i Club or the Ethiopian Club and talked about, those populations within Israel and had food, because food is the way to a college student's heart. There are lots of different ways in which we've done that, and we've done more in-depth conversations about different, the different narratives, the Israeli and Palestinian narrative, and understanding sort of what's happening and where do we go from here. And so there are lots of different things that we are able to do because we are not in such a contentious environment, and we're incredibly lucky in that way.
Yeah, I would just say, I think we're lucky also in Jewish studies in that we are engaged in a conversation about how the study of the Jews, the study of Israeli society matters, and matters not just for what happens to those people called Jews, but matters to people concerned about larger questions of religious pluralism and democracy, American foreign policy, history, human rights. So for me, I've always been heartened that my colleagues in the history department see it as a moral and intellectual imperative that we be teaching about the Jewish experience and giving students, not telling them what to think, right, but teaching them how to think and empower them. So when they want to engage with these hard questions, they then have the background and the context. And I think it's also fair to say that what you're hearing from Rabbi Rubin reflects the complementary roles, right? Our program is for anyone who wants to learn about the Jewish experience. And sometimes for people who want to ask questions and not be there to represent Jews, right? Not to speak for the Jews or to act as Jews, but to understand why Jews themselves disagree on such and such an issue. So it's one of the most important things we do, is create that opportunity, that context where people can come and do it. And fortunately, also, that means that we have partnerships with other units, Middle Eastern studies and Asian cultures and languages, which is where we teach Hebrew and where we teach actually not just modern Hebrew, but several kinds. We teach medieval Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, and giving people those different points of access, I find, is helpful. If people want to learn more, for instance, about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but they don't want to go directly into it. Maybe they want to learn more about the literature and the languages as a way to engage with it. Let me pivot over to Professor Ochs and ask her to share her thoughts about these complicated issues.
Thanks so much. I really treasure this opportunity that you folks at the UVA Lifetime Learning have given to us today. And I'll tell you why. Rabbi Jake a moment ago talked about how if something is going wrong, if there's an anti-Semitic incident, he can call the administration and get a good response, get an appropriate supportive response. And there's a problem that Jews have in America, which is that we're seen as a model minority, that we're a minority, that we can take care of ourselves. If we want to teach courses, and if we want there to be courses on Judaism and Jewish experience at the university, we will raise the money among donors, among philanthropists, among our alumni, to support the faculties, to support the programs. And what we don't usually get is outreach to us from the university saying, "Are you okay? You faculty members who were on the front lines in 2017, are you okay? Are your families okay?" And what's so beautiful about your reaching out to us, friends at UVA Lifetime Learning, is that you are saying to us, can you speak about your experiences? Share them with the community. And that is precious and beautiful. And I truly hope that this is I hope this is an opening so that we in Jewish life and Jewish studies at UVA can say, we need you to ask us if you are okay. And how can we help? And how can we be supportive? Because it is, yes, it is safe. Yes, it is a rich environment to be in, but we need help. We need help, and we need support. We need strength.
Thank you, Vanessa. I think that's really true. I think that's really true, because also, universities are complex. They're complex institutions, and they sometimes think about things in terms of putting out fires. What's the latest challenge we face as an institution? How can we respond to it? What is the biggest conflict, and how can we respond to it? And sometimes that model works well if you have good leadership and you're kind of agile, but it can also lead you to miss things if things don't, if they're not immediately visible, right? Or if they seem visible but then resolvable quickly, right? So I think one of the things we insist upon really is that this be seen as a set of questions, not just a set of communities and experiences, but a set of questions for what this university wants to be in the future, right? I think President Ryan has outlined a vision of what the University of Virginia needs to be, which is both a place that reckons with its past, right? And reckons, as all of America tries to do, to reckon with challenges of race, history of slavery, right? But also recognizes its assets and strengths as a place of inquiry, right? That a place that really is committed to scholarly inquiry and public facing, and a kind of a sense of its public mission. And for us in Jewish studies, I think what Vanessa is saying, and I would echo this, is that we see ourselves as central to that endeavor also, right? To reckon with the hard stuff that is there, even if it's not always visible in terms of anti-Semitism. And then also to reckon with the possibilities, right, of what we can do, and in a very open model, right? And in a way, when I look around the country, I feel we face challenges sometimes of not being immediately visible, but we also are not as encumbered by some challenges where there may be deep divides even within universities, departments, and units about the teaching of Jewish studies. And we partner with a lot of different organizations and units within the university, and that's the source of strength, and we want to continue to do that. Vanessa, maybe I'll turn back to you, actually. Many people have asked about local Jewish life, right? And there's always a town gown dynamic where the university is its own community and enclave. But much of what we do does involve engaging with the local community. They come to our programs, they come to our lectures, they take advantage of the teaching we do. Our students go out to study and research in these communities too sometimes. And maybe you could just say a word or two to characterize that. What is the atmosphere for Jewish life in Charlottesville these days, and how does that relate to what is happening at the university?
Well, let me thank you for asking. Let me preface that by saying that for 2 years, Jewish life in Charlottesville has essentially been what's going on in your own house,
Right.
or your own dorm room or your own apartment, and one of the benefits there is that there has been this remarkable uptick in Jewish learning opportunities around the world and Jewish prayer opportunities around the world. So come Saturday morning, I confess I'm much more likely to pray with 2 or 3 different congregations in New York City and Washington, D.C. I toggle between them. If things get a little dull, I'll move to another one. So we have a different Jewish experience has been quite transformed. That said, in the past, before COVID, there's this really easy back and forth between the local synagogue, Congregation Beth Israel, which is a liberal congregation. And many of our UVA students through historically and now have taught in the religious school. One of my current students in Jewish weddings said that she just used some of the videos that her wedding team made up in Jewish weddings class to show to her 3rd graders. So there's this easy back and forth. And many of the faculty members and their kids are part of the local community. As Professor Loeffler said, we're just lots of local Jewish folks come to our online lectures. And in the past, I've had lots of local folks as adult learners come to my classes, and my students love it. They love to have they love to have honorary parents and grandparents who are part of their world. It's just a very easy and cozy back and forth. I always love when I bring my Jewish students over to Congregation Beth Israel to visit services there, and I warn them. I say, look, I'll say, you have blonde hair. They are going to assume you are not Jewish. I know you're Jewish. I know you're from Bethesda. They will assume you're not Jewish. I warn the students who have more classically, stereotypically Jewish looks, but aren't Jewish. Like, if they give you a Torah honor, you can say, no, I'm just learning this. I just enrolled in a Judaism class. So there's this ease. There's a real ease, and it's precious. An ease and a welcome.
Thank you. I think that's so true. And I one of the things that is teaching at the university, we have a front row seat to Jewish cultural diversity in America, right? Religious diversity, but cultural diversity too, and ethnic diversity, racial diversity, right, in the Jewish community. And that's a wonderful and interesting thing to observe, that many students come in and they may be Latino and Jewish, they may be Black and Jewish, they may have very interesting family stories, right, involving immigration or involving extended family stories, as well as families who come in where, as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, they had some Jewish grandparents and they've been in the Catholic Church for a couple generations, but they have some Jewish ancestry that touch, and the Jewish history touched their lives, and then now they want to know how to touch it back and figure out what it is. So that Vanessa, do you want to say something about that?
I just want to add one thing that for so long the Jewish community officials have been always so upset about interfaith marriages or interreligious marriages, and I would say that one of the positive aspects of multicultural marriages is that the idea of multiculturalism for Jews has become a much more comfortable reality. So if you're African American and Jewish, or if you have a Jewish mother and a Catholic father, whatever your mixtures are, these are no longer seen so much as being weird or transgressive. It's part of your mix of identities. And we are here as Jewish studies professors, and I know that Jake is here as well at Hillel, to celebrate the mixes that people come with, and to help them as they forge their identities, which is what we do with religion in America these days. we forge, we create, we stitch together, and we also create new shapes within our religious traditions and within our religious communities. I feel that we're giving our students a place and the skills to be creative and affirmative in all aspects of their complex streams of religious and cultural identity.
Absolutely. You remind me that I would be remiss in my duties as Jewish Studies Program Director if I didn't mention the fact that these are things that people study, right, inside our courses. But we also study a lot of other things that might be surprising to people because they're quite traditional, right? We have some of the best experts in the world on Jewish textual traditions. You know, if you want to study rabbinics, if you want to study the Talmud, we have graduate students who come from all over to work with our faculty, as well as to study modern Jewish theology and thought. So the traditional layers of text, as well as the communities that are attached to that, also find a place at UVA. And that's an important piece of kind of the fabric. We have a few minutes left. We're gonna be good about our time here, and we have an awful lot of questions. I'm gonna try and put one or two together and ask Rabbi Rubin and Professor Ochs to just take a quick crack at them. I will also, however, say we're always happy to answer your questions. If you want to reach out to us, I'm always happy to answer questions about specifics. What do you teach? There is such and such a course offered, or about specifics of climate and context, what it's like, right? That's one of the purposes of this conversation also is to whet your appetites and to invite you to be in touch with us. Here's a question. Many people have said, how have things changed? Leaving aside the traumatic events of 2017 and leaving aside the pandemic, right? Many folks here who are both new to the UVA community or folks who were UVA students a long time ago want to know what is most striking and what has changed. And maybe I'll start with you, Jake. You're here with as a who, you're here as an alum and as a leader and a member of the community leadership. So what would you say is the most striking thing that's changed over the years? We didn't plan this question, so it's coming up from many of your own questions, and I'm putting Rabbi Rubin and Professor Ochs on the spot. But what would you say would be important to convey to people about how things have changed?
Are we talking generally or around Jewish life? Because I think
you could take it as you will. I think a lot of folks are asking about both, but maybe more to focus on Jewish.
Look, I think for Jewish life, I think there is a significantly more active community. I just think it's a more visible community. It's a more active community. There are lots of different ways in which people engage with, which include, whether it's through Hillel or Chabad or, volunteering at CBI or taking Jewish studies classes, or, there are lots of different ways that people can engage and in pretty vibrant ways. It feels very different. And when we for those who haven't been here, our facility, we've always had this small house that we had, and about 10 years ago, we built a 10,000 square foot addition onto that in order to, hold people when they were coming for holidays and Shabbat dinners. And when I would go out and I would talk about the need for this, and, part of my job is raising money, people looked at me like I was crazy. They just had nothing, because there were very few people who were engaged. It was a strong community. I think it was a joyful community, but it was a smaller community. And so when I go out and talk about sort of what exists now and the numbers and who's involved and the variety, it really, you can just see people just are shocked. I will say the other thing that I think has happened, and I see this all the time when prospective parents come, is I think for a long time, lots of students wanted to be at UVA, and their parents would say, "There are no Jews at UVA. You can't go to you can't go there." And I actually visibly watch parents exhale when they walk into our building and see that there is a significant place for Jewish students, and once we begin to talk about all the things that are happening, and we connect them with other students who are from their areas, and they talk about what their Jewish life is like. I mean, we are seeing a different type of Jewish student, and students who always would have said, no, I'm going to go to Michigan, I'm going to go to Tulane, I'm going to go, right, places that are known to be strong Jewish schools. There are those people who are coming here. And so that's very different. And it adds a lot of richness and variety and, to our community, which is wonderful. So I would just say just sort of the visibility, the growth of the community and the variety has been tremendous in lots of different ways. And, one of our biggest hurdles we're always trying to get over is oftentimes when parents are looking at Jewish, are looking at schools, they turn to their friend who they know went to UVA, who lives in their town, and says, what was Jewish life like when you were there? And the answer is not always a great answer. And so my hope is, now that you all have heard what Jewish life is like, you can help us sort of spread this story. And it's very different than it was. And so, this has really become a vibrant place for Jewish students. So I'll let some of there are other things, but I'll let Vanessa take a crack at.
Yeah, before I turn to Vanessa, I'll just say, yeah, I think that's true. Many people have asked, there's a very fascinating history of Jewish students and faculty at UVA that goes all the way back to the beginning. There are large patches that we still don't know about, and there are stories that we, are still uncovering about different eras. But also our program, has roots that go back several decades. I just see that Professor Alan Latofsky is on this call. I saw that name flashed up, who along with a few others was teaching in the late 60s and early 70s. And so there have been pioneers all along the way who've come through UVA and contributed to it. But things have also grown dramatically. And I think I'm going to be happy to give the last word to Professor Ochs, who really has been a pioneer who's built up the Jewish Studies program. Her arrival, along with Peter Ochs, the professor who is her husband, was another turning point in growing our program's capacity and also its visibility. And really beginning to create a new kind of community of inquiry, a formal community of inquiry that I think we're still working with today. So, Professor and Rabbi Ochs, because she wears two hats.
Thanks, Jim.
What might you share with us as we finish out our hour here?
So I want to both offer a two-sided thought. One, my first thought is that of celebration, is that it has always something that has been like this from the very start. Is that for Jewish students at UVA, Hillel and the Jewish Studies program have always held hands. We've always supported each other. We've always been in and out, sort of like kids who talk about being in and out of each other's houses. There's always this very easy back and forth, which is wonderfully supportive, and I'm so grateful for that. By the way, fewer Jewish students there are fewer Jewish studies majors now and fewer religious studies majors now than in the past because of this tremendous push culturally for getting a job. And there's this anxiety, will a religious studies major, will a Jewish studies major get you a job? By the way, my students who did Jewish studies majors, religious studies majors, they've got great jobs in all kinds of ways. I'll talk to your parents afterwards. But it's still a place for incredible inquiry. I will say, and here's the more challenging part of what I have to say, is that when I came to UVA, it was when Dean Mel Loeffler was starting up the program, and I would go with him and the UVA development office folks, and we would go visiting donors, and we would be speaking with alumni, and we were building this program up. And it wasn't just the professors of Jewish studies and the director of Jewish studies; it was the administration that was behind us. And that's something that is necessary at any university where there's going to be a flourishing Jewish studies program. We need to have the development folks, we need to have the university behind us, holding us up as we do our work. And I'm going to be hopeful that we will have that.
Thank you. Well, you've given us a charge. You've given us something to look to build in a direction, even as we've been able to, I think, celebrate today all the wonderful things that have been achieved and that we see day to day. And we are very happy and fortunate that we had this event with Office of Engagement and Lifetime Learning. So we are really happy to invite them. I think Susan Lynch is going to rejoin us now just to usher us out with a final word.
Thank you so much to our distinguished panel for providing your expertise and experience this afternoon. It was my honor to host this panel for Lifetime Learning in the Office of Engagement. And it was so very moving to learn more about Hanukkah and the Jewish community here at UVA, especially to discuss ways that all of us can support the community here in Charlottesville. I'd like to bring some information to your attention. You can check out our Lifetime Learning programs, the Vodcast library, and our UVA Speaks podcast series to watch and listen to our expert UVA faculty. You can find all Lifetime Learning events and online resources at our website at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. In the meantime, I want to wish everyone a healthy, happy, and safe holiday season. Thank you for being with us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. As we close out the program, I'm going to share something that Professor Ochs shared with me. It is a piece from the UVA University Singers, and it's a performance of Psalm 23. So thank you so much.
Adonai,